Hello and welcome to Diecast Diaries. I'm Dan, and a bit of an unusual video tonight in that the models I've got here I don't really know that much about. I quite fancy doing another naval or maritime related video, and although I will be doing a couple on the Minic ships range at some point, I thought it'd be quite interesting to have a look at these. So what I do know is that they're all models of Royal Navy warships. They're made of lead and they were made in Britain. Apart from that, there isn't a huge amount of info out there about them. I have done a few Google searches, but all that brought up was some photos of the models, but no further details other than what I already knew. I'm guessing they date from the 1930s, as they all represent ships that were extant then. With the exception of one that I picked up from a toy fair in the early 90s, the rest of them used to be my uncle's. As he was born in the late 40s, I'm guessing they could well have been second-hand when he got them. They certainly look like they've been through a few carpet battles. So, onto the models themselves. The first one I've got here is HMS Furious. So, quite obviously, an aircraft carrier. The HMS Furious was modified from a Courageous class battle cruiser, and it was modified initially by removing the turrets from the front and installing a small flight deck, and then the same at the back. And whilst it was in that configuration, it actually has the distinction of the first plane landing on a moving warship. That was conducted with Furious. That arrangement didn't prove to be too successful, though, and during the 1920s it was fully converted into an aircraft carrier, but still quite unusual in that it's just got a completely open deck and no superstructure. Did see some action in World War II, mostly sort of training and anti-submarine patrols. Took part in the Norwegian campaign where it operated Fairy Swordfish biplanes. Served as an aircraft transport, carrying aircraft to Gibraltar, from where they were then carried on by other ships to Malta. Also took place in the invasion of North Africa, Operation Torch, and then was part of the home fleet for the rest of the war. And as clearly, by the end of the war, it would have been an extremely old and outdated ship. It was scrapped not long afterwards in 1948. So the model, it's just one big lump of lead. The detail, I suppose, isn't bad. You can see the paintwork has sort of chipped quite a bit on this one. But the good thing with this one, because it's not got any kind of bits that stick out, there isn't really anything to break off. So as you can see, details underneath, there's really not a lot to go on. All it says is, quite crudely as well, I have to say, HMS Furious, British made. And it's exactly the same for all of the ships in this range. All they say is the name of the ship and just British made, but all in this same sort of quite crude writing underneath. So that's HMS Furious. The next one, this is the one that I picked up from a toy fair in the 90s, so this is why it's in noticeably better condition than any of the other ones. This is a ship that probably needs no introduction, really. It's HMS Hood, the famous, or should I say even infamous, battle cruiser. Launched in 1918, it was an Admiral-class battle cruiser. It was the only one completed of its class. It was actually the largest warship in the world for 20 years. Pride of the Royal Navy. In World War II, it served in sort of Icelandic and the Norwegian Sea, hunting for German commerce raiders. Took part in the destruction of the French fleet in Algeria. And then in May 1941, it was ordered to intercept the German battleship Bismarck. And unfortunately, during the Battle of Denmark Strait on the 24th of May 1941, it was sunk by Bismarck itself. And very sadly, only 3 out of its crew of 1,418 survived. So it was a very well-known ship. Certainly, I would say out of all the ones I've got here, I would say it's easily the most well-known one. And you can see, because this one's in a little bit better condition, this one's also got the barrels on the main gun turrets. Now, of course, on the real ship, there would have been sort of twin turrets, rather, I should say. Of course, the detail isn't sort of enough on this. It's just kind of one barrel per gun. But you can get the sort of general sort of look of what the ship looked like. But again, I mean, this one just says Hood underneath, so this one's actually not even got the sort of British made on it. But that's HMS Hood. And the next ship I've got, this is probably the next most well-known. This is HMS Repulse. It was a renowned class battle cruiser, launched in 1916. This and its sister ship were actually the world's fastest capital ships upon completion. Saw a brief bit of action in World War I. World War II, similar to Hood, spent some time hunting for commerce raiders, took part in the Norwegian campaign, and then it was November 41, it was transferred over to Force Z over in the Far East to hopefully deter Japanese aggression. And it was on the 10th of December 1941, only 3 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, that in company with the battleship HMS Prince of Wales, Repulse was sunk by Japanese bombers. first of kind of several incidents in World War II where it was proved that the battleship really wasn't the sort of main flagship that it used to be. That its place clearly being taken by aircraft carriers. But yeah, so that's HMS Repulse. You can see again HMS Repulse, British made underneath. All of these, as I mentioned, obviously apart from the HMS Hull, they're not in fantastic condition. Some of them will have little bits missing off the superstructure. I mean, you can imagine any masts and things like that would have been extremely thin because there's quite obviously something broken off there. But yeah, I think finding these in any kind of sort of perfect condition is going to be sort of quite difficult. But yes, that's HMS Repulse. So then the majority of the other ships are sort of more obscure, I would say. The next one I've got here is HMS Frobisher. HMS Frobisher was a Hawkins-class heavy cruiser, launched in 1920. By World War II, it had been relegated to serving as a training ship, reconverted back into a heavy cruiser, but didn't really kind of enter service again until 1942. Saw service with the Eastern Fleet, a lot of escort duty, and then took place in Operation Neptune, which was the naval part of the D-Day invasion. Damaged by a torpedo, August 44, converted back to a training ship, and then scrapped in 1949. Well, again, detail not bad on this one, especially with it being a noticeably smaller ship than the other ones that we've kind of seen so far. So that's HMS Frobisher. And then we have HMS York. Well, this was launched in 1928, and it was the name ship of its class of heavy cruisers. Escorted convoys, took part in the Norwegian campaign, transferred to the Mediterranean in late 1940, and was sunk in Suda Bay in Crete in March 1941 by Italian explosive motorboats, which was something that I was obviously quite intrigued to look up and read about. And I think the wreck was actually there until the early 50s when it was finally salvaged. So that's HMS York. And then we have HMS Arethusa. This was launched in 1934. Again, it was the name ship of its class. This time it was a light cruiser. Served in the Mediterranean and the Norwegian campaign, and again took part, similar to HMS Hood, took part in the destruction of the French fleet in Algeria. Escorted Malta convoys, hit by a torpedo in November of 42. That actually kept it out of action again all the way through until June 44, although it was able to enter service in time to take part in the D-Day operation, where it served as part of the bombardment force off Sword Beach. Damaged by a magnetic mine not long afterwards, transferred to the Mediterranean fleet, placed in reserve after the war, and scrapped in 1950. So that's HMS Arethusa. And then this is probably the only other one of the ships that I think is particularly well known. This is HMS Nelson. And this and its sister ship, HMS Rodney, I always thought were really kind of unusual looking ships, and they place all of their armament at the front and have nothing sort of aft at all. I always think they just look wrong to me, but they were sort of fairly successful ships, I think. So it was launched in 1925, and again it was the name ship of its class of battleships. Served in the Atlantic and home fleets, spent some time escorting Atlantic convoys and convoys to Malta. Torpedoed in September of 41. Also took part in the invasion of North Africa in November of 42, Operation Torch, as well as the invasions of Sicily, Italy, and D-Day as well. It struck a mine later that year in 44 and was under repair for the rest of the year. Mid-45 transferred to the Eastern Fleet, but again it was quite an aging battleship, and also the age of the battleship was over really by the end of the Second World War, and it was scrapped in 1949. So that's HMS Nelson. And then we have HMS Royal Sovereign. Well, this was a Revenge class battleship launched in 1915. Didn't actually see any action in World War I. Based in Malta during the 1930s, and then in March 1942 it was transferred to the Eastern Fleet, but it was withdrawn after the Battle of Ceylon, which was a major Japanese raid in which a number of British ships were sunk. I think it was felt that this would have been quite vulnerable. As I say, it certainly wasn't a brand new ship by the time of World War II. This one had actually a bit of an unusual end to its career. In May 1944, it was actually transferred to the Soviet Navy, and they used it for escorting Arctic convoys. The Russians returned it to the Royal Navy in 1949, but as I say, because it was not a new ship by any stretch of the imagination, it was simply scrapped not long afterwards. So that's HMS Royal Sovereign. And then the last one I've got is HMS Queen Elizabeth, certainly not to be confused with the current aircraft carrier of the same name. This was a name ship of her class of battleships, launched in 1913, served in the Grand Fleet in World War I, but didn't really see much action. World War II, took part in the defence of Crete in 1941, damaged by Olympic mines in December 41, and under repair for quite a while. Rejoined the Home Fleet in July 43, transferred over to the Eastern Fleet in Jan 44, and took part in a few actions up through to the end of the war. But another ship that obviously was quite old by the end of the Second World War, and another ship that was obsolete as well. This was another one that ended up being scrapped in 1948. So those are the 9 models that I have. I've no idea if this is a complete set or not. Obviously, there's every chance there could be more out there. If anyone has any more information on these, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. As I say, it's just not a range I've been able to find much about at all, apart from, as I say, the names of the ships and that they're made in Britain. But yeah, in the meantime, please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.